But what exactly is the meta? We're not talking about self-referential media or the doomed toy of a billionaire. We're talking about video games. We're talking about the most effective tactic available. The meta, not that one, exists in pretty much any video game, unless maybe it's a sandbox game or something, but even then a meta of sorts, not that one. We'll develop around the best ways to craft something, for example. So you'd be hard pushed to find a game without a meta. The meta I experience most would be in MMORPGs, where there is a heavy emphasis on endgame. The meta will arise around things like raids and dungeons, where the players within those communities will over time figure out and document the best and most effective ways of defeating a certain boss or overcoming a challenging section or certain mechanics, and in that way the meta is necessary. I mean, it would be impossible to create a multiplayer game and design it to be infinitely random or changing so as a meta can't form. In these games you have boss mechanics from a limited number of bosses, you have a limited amount of classes, skills and items at your disposal. So if you take all those things and add them together, eventually the most effective tactics will appear. So is it fair to say that limits provide the framework for the meta, and the fact that limits exist is what makes the meta possible? Like, I guess if you had limitless choices and eventualities, perhaps technically you could always say that there might be a better way out there, potentially at least. Anyway, that's enough mind baking for now. Let's keep going. Now, this isn't to say that you can't go against the meta. Many people find ways of completing games without the most effective tactic, but if you get enough people all playing a game, the most effective tactic will show itself at some point, quite often shockingly fast. Never underestimate the collective power of people working on a problem together. If only we could apply some of that cooperation to real life issues. I think my first experience of knowingly coming up against the meta was when I was playing ESO Elder Scrolls Online with a friend years ago. Whilst I loved video games, I wasn't quite as clued into how you were supposed to play those type of games. Not back then anyway. I spoke about this in another video a bit, but in the early days of playing MMOs and multiplayer games in general, I just kind of played them like I was playing a single player RPG. Just merrily doing my thing, letting my imagination take me where it must, and generally enjoying running around having carefree fun. Proper good old ignorant noob behaviour. My friend, who was way more into these types of games, having experienced the endgame of World of Warcraft and having a set of online friends that he would be able to play other games with, informed me that I was building my character wrong. Now, he wasn't being mean, and he knew that I didn't really care, but it was the first time I was sort of introduced to the concept that there was a perceived right way to do it, and that my hybrid build I was making wasn't ever going to be strong enough to cut it at the end game. At that point, I just sort of carried on, as I didn't really give a fuck. I was making a sort of magic knight of the Holy Order or some such, spending my points equally across HP and magicka, wearing heavy armour instead of cloth, which would have boosted my spells, selecting items based purely on aesthetics, and generally doing everything wrong. Well, wrong according to the meta anyway. Years later, when I was back playing World of Warcraft, and this time more aware of how the game was commonly played by the masses, I started to encounter the meta again. This time though in the form of guide sites like Icy Veins or Wowhead, and it started by wanting to know that little tidbit of information, like I wanted to know where I could find a certain pet for my hunter or a hint for a quest, and before you know it you're looking at build guides for the correct rotation of abilities or best skills to choose. Now, as I've mentioned before, the way I play these games doesn't really bring me into contact with the meta as much as a hardcore raider, but once the veil has been lifted and you start to think in terms of the meta, then you're always aware that there is indeed a meta. And the temptation to find it and follow it, even for a casual like myself, can be too tempting. Now, hate is a strong word and I'm being a bit hyperbolic, but The reason why I kind of hate the meta is it seems to peel away the wonder that you have when you start a new game. Let me explain. When I start playing a game like an MMO, I will run around doing quests and getting upgrades, those little dopamine hits as I slowly improve and I watch the numbers go up and the little sound happens. There is for me a real joy when you unlock a new skill and you read the description and you suddenly make a connection with another skill and your imagination starts to work and you see a path in front of you and a theme for your character that you could start building. I remember in Guild Wars 2 when I was playing through with my Sylvari Ranger and I unlocked the Soul Beast subclass. Then I captured a Fang de Boda as my pet and this unlocked some toxic / poison skills, and suddenly I was excited at the prospect of building my character around every poisonous ability I could ram into it. I would combine her toxic abilities with some toughness abilities and so I could just kind of crash into things whilst unloading poison everywhere. Now, as a side note, Guild Wars 2 is quite forgiving for that kind of thing, and I never changed her because that is what I want. That was my theme. But I am sure if I wanted to push further into the end game, I would start reading guides, and slowly but surely the joy of Longfart, the Sylvari Ranger, would seep away. But whilst I kept Longfart pure in Guild Wars 2, there are many other games that I have gone through a similar process, and I always have that excitement of discovery and creativity which then slowly fades as I realise that there is in fact another way, perhaps even a better way, and then my enthusiasm is gone. Another example of this might be Elder Scrolls Online. I have gone back several times to replay the game with the intention of going through the story, which is admittedly one of the strong points, but I've mentioned before that I'm not really a story person and I'm a bit of a tech skipper. But through years of playing that game, I now know where good grind spots are, or which armour sets I want for my build, and as I get into leveling I always end up in Glenumbra, running between the werewolf camp and the dolmen and cheesing world bosses in Deshaan to pick up the Mother's Sorrow set. It is almost like once the secret has been revealed, I can't do anything else, and I will always end up back there doing the same thing. Okay, I know that once you have played any game through, the mystery and the wonder of discovery has gone, but the fact that I know that there is a quicker way of leveling my character, it's like I just can't resist. You can play these games how you want, of course, but owing to the fact that millions of little researchers have swarmed all over the game, it is not even in question that there is indeed a most effective tactic available. Even a game with such infinite upgrade combinations and a skill tree freedom as Path of Exile will succumb to the weight of its players stripping it down and pulling out the morsels of the meta. I've been playing Project Ascension, which is a private WoW server which has a classless setup where you combine whatever skills you want, and I've been doing that in an attempt to stretch the meta. For sure as shit there will be an ideal combination of skills that the player base will have already found. A side note, just did a quick Google while writing this, and yes, there are pages upon pages of build setups and videos about the topic and new kind of almost classes that people have named and categorized, so yeah, the meta is in full effect. So it would seem that the meta really is inevitable. Before I sort of tackle talking about the inevitability of the meta, I thought I would have a little search just to see what the internet said about the existence of, say, meta-less games. Well, it turns out that there is a lot of discussion, but only really one answer. No, everything has a meta. Fall Guys came up a number of times in various posts, but that too has a meta on how best to get around a certain course or minigame. Perhaps maybe something like a slot machine where it's just purely luck based, but A, we're entering into a different argument as to whether that even constitutes a game, and B, might there even be a meta around that? Like, how much money would you need to play and how long for before you eventually sort of win and come away on top? Not particularly sophisticated, but still. So if there are no games without meta, is meta part of the game itself? Like, am I looking at this from the wrong angle? Certainly the meta can be used to cycle through various seasons of a game, nerfing and boosting skills and builds to continually keep the player base chasing the meta. This obviously doesn't eliminate the meta, just keeps it fresh, and therefore part of the game is to chase it and identify it before it once again shifts like some sort of moving maze. In this way, the meta becomes part of the game, and whilst it isn't a part that I myself take part in, I can see how this would be interesting, especially in games that you're expected to play for like long periods of time, like months or even years. And though not quite as immediately involved as the shift in seasonal nerfing and boosting, I will admit to enjoying sitting and reading build guides in my downtime, sort of way of staying immersed in your favourite game, crafting your ideas for things that you will try in your head the next time you log in. So there is always a meta of sorts, but is the real meta when there is something at stake, when things get serious, when shit gets competitive. There will always be a meta, clearly, for whatever game you play, but clearly when the meta means the most is when things get competitive. When the difference between you and your opponent is getting that little bit more performance, that little bit more speed or little bit more damage, this is when the meta matters most. Like, regret the amount of times I have to say fucking meta in this video. It's a bit like playing poker, I suppose. You can play poker with matchsticks, but it isn't real poker. Real poker only comes out when there is a real possibility of losing something. Otherwise, you just won't play the same way. If we are playing for matches, then I am going to go in all in every single time until I fucking lose, and then I just won't give a shit. If there's money riding on it, I'm sweating on it. I'm keeping it cool. I'm waiting and I'm calculating. I'm holding those pocket pairs. I'm going to wait until the best moment to unleash them because it means more to me, because there's something to lose. So the closer we get to endgame, where the investment of a player's time has led them to a critical point, the more the meta means. And so with that being the case, there has been genuine sacrifice to get there. And if that is the case, it raises another question. I mean, in a way, the short answer based upon only my personal opinion is sort of no, because I ascribe to the fact that you should do your own thing. But to expound upon this, I think that if you want to enter spaces where the meta matters, then yes you do. You may or may not have seen Dan Olsen's epic video on why it is rude to suck at Warcraft, and I would recommend that you go watch it after this, of course. But the reasoning there essentially comes down to what was mentioned previously about the amount of time and effort that has been put into something. Time is the most precious commodity you have. As I get older, I am keenly aware that the amount of time we have is finite. I am also aware that the subjectivity of what you choose to spend time on is wide and varied, and there is no right or wrong thing to sink your precious resource into. So whilst I may think that it isn't worth giving that much time over to chasing the meta in MMOs, and I also think that people who inhabit those spaces can sometimes be pretty bitchy and sweaty about it, I do understand any irritation and anger when someone doesn't understand the invisible contract of the meta and how your noob actions can mean wasted effort on their part, and in some cases quite a lot of wasted effort. I always think that you shouldn't be a dick to anyone, especially if they don't know what is at stake, but we must also have some empathy for those that have invested in the meta. It is easy to say don't be stupid, it's just a game, but if you dedicate hundreds, even thousands of hours into something, it isn't just a game anymore, it's part of your life. And with that thought, does life have a meta? You know, I so often think about the link between video games and real life, in the systems that govern both of them and the similarities that you can draw between them. Perhaps even the lessons that can be learned from video games and applied to real life systems of governance. Arguably, life is just the biggest skill tree available. No end of skills to spec into, so no end of metas to try and learn. Every little task is subject to its own little meta, the collection and transference of human knowledge in action. From the first nut opened by a rock to how to plaster your ceiling, the glorious breaking down and redistribution of information. But when I sort of think about life having a meta, I am thinking more kind of like high level. Like when I look through build guides for an MMO, I'm also thinking of people, say, watching TikToks or reels about how to get ahead or how to win at life. Self-help shit. Get on some of that hustle culture, rise and grind and all of that. I'm thinking of your Andrew Tates and other motivational speakers urging you to clean up your room and excel in the system. The system made and run on money. But what does it mean to win? And how likely is it? And what does it mean if I lose? Well, I know what those chumps think winning means. Winning to them is leaving your empathy at the door and only caring about yourself and your own well-being. And those people would tell me I'm stupid because that is the way of the world and all that, and maybe there is a certain logic to that way of thinking, but that way of thinking only exists because of this world. This world and the Western way of life promoting it. But I find it to be a very temporary, very fleeting thing. I'm not saying that the East or anyone else has the answer necessarily, so pipe down fucking Western chauvinist weirdos, but anything any of those selfish dickheads tell you to do is not going to benefit humanity. Humanity's strength is working together. Cooperation and communication has made us achieve great things. Not everyone walking around the place just out for themselves. We didn't make scientific advancements by punching shit with our muscles, we had to work together. Sure, you can beat someone into submission, but that is never going to be as effective as everyone willingly working together for the good of all. You may think that the world is a certain way, but open your eyes and look around at all the good people who give their time to charity and other acts of kindness. Their existence proves that another way is possible. Greed and aggression aren't just human nature and unavoidable, they're a choice. And that is assuming that you can even reach the success that they are trying to sell you on. See, that's the feature of the system they don't tell you, that not everyone can win. They might tell you that so you buy their self-help book or pyramid scheme, but this capitalist system promotes haves and have-nots, and there will always be way more have-nots. That is the way it works. So I would say that it is better odds thinking and fighting for a world and a way of living that pulls us all together and raises the tide for all of us, and not just sitting there doing the whole temporarily embarrassed millionaire thing. Maybe it could be you, but it probably won't be. That's not to say that some level of self-help isn't helpful. We can all get guidance on how to live healthier, both mentally and physically, or help on how to achieve a certain task. But if that help is narcissistic, selfish, and centered around someone profiting from the insecurities of you and others, then that isn't the way. Look, I'm aware I went on a bit of a rant there and sort of meandered a little way from the main subject, but I am sort of wandering closer to the point that I want to make. Clearly there is literally a meta to everything, and I think a meta is not bad or wrong, it is just the way it is. But that is just what I will call the mechanical meta, the meta devoid of all emotion and personal opinion, the factual meta of how to achieve a target, not the meta of the heart or the philosophical meta. I think what I want to allude to when talking about escaping the meta is more about your own personal enjoyment, about the fact that you don't always have to do things the perceived right way, and about thinking and identifying when and where to seek the meta and when to just go your own way. Sure, if you want to build an extension to your fucking house, then you would want to follow one of the main methods that are tried and tested so it doesn't fall in on your head. But when it comes to living your life, don't spend it measuring yourself against others, do it your own way. So in relation to video games and MMOs, the only way to escape the meta is by setting your own and having the confidence to adhere to it. I have said before that I play a lot of those games and I just don't engage with the end game. I level alts. I mindlessly run around making the number go up. I use them as relaxing games as I consume content on a second monitor or the TV. Because you know what? It doesn't actually matter if I reach the highest peak or experience all there is to experience in the game, as long as I am happy and I am satisfied. You do you and I'll do me. And as far as life is concerned, the same thing goes. You don't have to maximise every waking hour, grind yourself into dust. Just take things at your own speed. You don't have to complete the game, you don't have to experience everything, you just have to do what makes you happy. Set your own meta. Thanks for watching.